Carl and Rob Reiner are a Hollywood father and son of legend. Combined, they have starred in, written, and directed some of the funniest and most beloved television series and movies in U.S. entertainment history. Today, on a special 50 Plus Prime broadcast, we speak with father and son about the deep love and respect they share for one another and the great success each man has achieved. Welcome to our special 50 Plus Prime broadcast celebrating Hollywood's talented father and son, Carl and Rob Reiner. I'm Tony Fama. When Rob Reiner was growing up, his father was already one of America's leading funny men. Rob began learning lessons from the man he loved and admired, and those lessons were to have a profound effect on the rest of his life. This is the story of a father and son whose love for each other exceeds even the great talent they share.
The best advice he could give me was to be the role model, was to be who he was. And I watched the way he conducted his life, the way he conducted his career, and how he worked with other people.
Rob is my idea of the best director working today, and best movie maker. He makes movies that are irrefutably brilliant.
Rob Reiner is 70 years old. About 62 years ago,
when I was like 8 years old, I told my mother that I wanted to change my name, and she went and told my father, and my father came over to me and he said, he felt bad because he thought, oh my God, this poor kid, how's he going to live up to the, to being Carl Reiner's son, and it's a very long shadow and all that. And he said to me, he said, well, what do you want to change your name to? And I said, Carl. So, I mean, basically, I wanted to be him.
The Dick Van Dyke Show, starring Dick Van Dyke.
And what a role model for a son who wants to be just like his dad. Carl Reiner created The Dick Van Dyke Show. The comedy classic he also wrote and produced won 15 Emmy Awards in its 6-year run from 1961 through 1966. Reiner took home 3 of those Emmys for outstanding writing achievement. Carl Reiner, always humble, credits Mary Tyler Moore for the program's success.
Without her, the Dick Van Dyke Show would have not existed. That was a perfect piece of casting. She was the single most talented woman I'd ever worked with. First of all, she was a dancer to begin with, and dancers, if they have acting talent, there's no stopping them. I mean, I waited for the moments I could write shows that Mary and Dick, where Mary and Dick danced.
What we need is good old harmony.
The young apprentice was taking notes.
Harmony.
I saw how he worked. I mean, to me, the best work he's done is the Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, he's done a lot of great things, but that was right out of his life experience. He tapped into what he felt, what he experienced, his ideas, his thoughts, and he put it out there. He also did it with Enter Laughing, which was about his, when he was young and he was starting out in show business.
Hello, Wanda. If I were king, the stars to your feet I would bring.
Ronald Colman, right?
Did it really sound like him?
Exactly.
That was the great influence on me, to see that if you want to make something, honest and truthful, try to tap into the things that matter to you, the things that you feel, the things you think about.
Rob Reiner had learned a valuable lesson.
When I did Stand By Me, which was very different from the kinds of things that he did, was the first time I really connected with who I am. And it was, a tremendous boost for me to realize that people will accept if you, express yourself through your work, they can connect with it because they'll have something that they can relate to.
Mighty Mouse is a cartoon. Superman is a real guy. No way a cartoon could beat up a real guy.
Stand By Me was a dramatic and commercial success. grossing more than $52 million in the United States after its 1986 release, and receiving 1 Oscar nomination.
Where do you hear this?
Rob Reiner was on his way, following in the footsteps of his dad, who was already a Hollywood director of legend.
George was a delight. I mean, absolute delight.
In 1977, Reiner directed George Burns in the comedy classic, Oh God.
When I cast him, I said, nobody could be better than George Burns. When they said, how about you? He had a show called The Burns and Allen Show where he stood outside his house and prophesied what was going to happen. I said, that's it. And he came and he was wonderful.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
So help me, me.
So help you.
If it pleases the court, and even if it doesn't please the court, I'm God, Your Honor.
Is he laughing?
Yeah, we're all laughing. Like father, like son. Carl and Rob Reiner have been making us laugh for more than a century combined. And for both men, television was the catalyst. For Carl Reiner, it was Your Show of Shows, a live comedy program also featuring Sid Caesar, Imogen Coca, and Howard Morris. In this classic skit, the 4 leads play mechanical figures in a German clock. Reiner's character swings a hammer, striking Caesar's hammer. That triggers Morris to pump the billows and Coca to cool things off with water. That is until the process springs a leak. Your Show of Shows was on the air from 1950 to 1954. Reiner received an Emmy nomination for his work.
Is that anything like Monopoly?
20 years later, Rob Reiner played Michael Stivic, Archie Bunker's liberal son-in-law, on the television classic All in the Family.
It's a psychological game.
American audiences watched and laughed in record numbers.
People, it sounds left-wing to me. Anything after George III is left-wing to you.
For his role, Rob Reiner won 2 Emmy Awards, and his dad was right there by his side. This is your first Emmy from All in the Family?
Yeah, they were from All in the Family, yeah.
When you won this, what was your dad's reaction?
Okay, so now here's something interesting. I was really, really sick, and I couldn't be there.
It was Carl Reiner who accepted that Emmy for his son.
There's a question that was asked maybe 100,000 times to his mother and myself. How do we feel having a son like Rob doing this part? And his mother Estelle, myself, my daughter Anne, and my little son Lucas are very, very, very proud of you, Rob.
And that one, the second one, he actually presented it to me. I remember the line. I said, talk about parental approval. I remember saying that as I got it.
Talk about parental approval.
When we come back, the many Hollywood father and son firsts shared by Carl and Rob Reiner. Welcome back to our special 50 Plus Prime broadcast celebrating the success of Hollywood father and son Carl and Rob Reiner. This is a father and son team that shares several firsts in U.S. entertainment history.
And it was thrilling. The fact that Rob and I were there together, it was unbelievable. The only thing I worried about was whether I'd be able to get up from kneeling, and it was no problem.
On April 17, 2017, Carl and Rob Reiner became the first father and son in Hollywood history to have their handprints and footprints encased in cement at Grauman's Chinese Theater on the same day. They also added their signatures.
And I suggested that not only we put our handprints and our footprints, but since we're both bald, I thought we could put our bald head prints in there, but they didn't want that. On the day that it happened, I was, you know, you're kind of caught up in having to you know, there's a million cameras there and people, you know, and you're kind of just going through it to try to get through the experience, and you're kind of performing in a way. And it was the next day that it hit me that, wow, this is like amazing, you know, this is like incredible, you know, that this would happen.
Incredible success this father and son share. Incredible love and respect they have for each other. It's a respect grown out of a close-knit family.
The more I see you, the more I want you.
Carl and Estelle Reiner were married for 65 years until Estelle's passing in 2008. They raised 3 children and 5 grandchildren. When you watch Carl and Rob Reiner interact, it's clear that love of family was central in building a happy home, and that with love came the security to create a shared success unprecedented in their business.
I remember when Spinal Tap first came out, which was my first film. He had a film, All of Me, which was with Steve Martin and Lily Tomlin, and both of those films were selected for a lot of top, they have the top 10 lists at the end of the year. And both of those films were selected for many of the top 10 lists. And I thought, wow, what are the chances of that, where you have a father and son both directing films that are in top 10 lists in one year? It's never happened. And so this was another one of those kind of things. And if you walk along Hollywood Boulevard, are 2, stars they have on the Walk of Fame. They're right next to each other. So it can't be, you can't be more proud.
And a father can't be more proud of his son.
One of his films, and it's nothing to do with nepotism, is one of my favorite films of all time. If you want to feel good, put on The Princess Bride. If you're down, put on The Princess Bride.
Can you move at all?
Move? You're alive. If you want, I can fly.
Father and son have more to share. At age 70, Rob Reiner has several film and television projects in production. At age 95,
this may be my best work.
Carl Reiner has published a new book.
It's called Too Busy to Die. And its genesis is that Mel and I were sitting here watching The Scoundrel with Noel Coward, and he was tying a bow tie. And Mel said, "Look how dexterously he does that." I said, "All actors can do that."
That's Mel, as in Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner's best friend.
It's the story of my first performances, my senior, how I got to be a performer. And there's my mother and I, and there with me with Sid Caesar. It started when I was 13 years old. There was a thing called the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, which sent out, there was a truck sent out to Crotona Park. It flapped its open and became a stage. And I saw my first play in Crotona Park on a hill that had 2,500 kids and people sitting watching.
Wow.
And it was mesmerizing. And at that moment is the moment I said, that's a good thing to be, an actor.
And a good actor Carl Reiner still is, reciting Hamlet from his first drama class nearly 80 years ago.
There with fantastic garlands did she come of clove flowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples, that liberal shepherds give a grosser name, but our cold maids do dead men's fingers call them.
Soon after studying Shakespeare, Reiner was cast in the stage production of The Bishop Misbehaves. At no more than 18, this is the first photograph ever taken of Reiner as a professional actor. In our interview, Reiner was just warming up.
Yes, and on the cover are all my favorite movies.
He's working on another book in 2 volumes, this one entitled Approaching 96, The Pics I Love Viewing and Doing, about the movies he loves.
Random Harvest, my favorite. Count of Monte Cristo, Greatest Comeuppance movie, Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, Mark Azora with Tyrone Power. I start with, when I was 6 years old, I went to the Belmont Theater and saw Faust. That was actually the first picture I saw, and I I watched it behind my hands. I just couldn't watch. It was scary.
Every film represented with a print of its original poster and 4 photos. And then there's Volume 2, including one of Reiner's own films.
That meant the way it played, which was one of my favorite.
He lives to write. He loves writing. I mean, my father started tweeting before I did. I mean, he was on Twitter long before I did, before I got on Twitter. And he, you know, he loves it. I mean, he gets up every morning and he writes. And, you know, what a great role model. Again, back to a role model. I mean, he just loves to be engaged.
When we come back, Carl Reiner's latest movie, and a behind-the-scenes look at that time Rob helped his dad and Mel Brooks perfect a classic comedy routine. Welcome back to 50 Plus Prime's special broadcast about Hollywood's legendary father and son, Carl and Rob Reiner. At 95, Carl Reiner is as creative as he's ever been. For Rob Reiner, sharing in that creative spirit with his father brings back a memory that would lead to one of the funniest comedy skits of all time. Rob Reiner grew up with a famous dad and his dad's famous best friend, Mel Brooks. Even today, with both men in their 90s, Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks are still going strong.
Mel Brooks comes over every night. They watch, you know, they have a little dinner, whatever, watch a movie, and they have a great time. I mean, I'm glad that they have each other.
Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks have been friends for more than 65 years. And there's a story that ties all 3 men together, dating to the time Rob was a teenager and enjoyed a private performance.
He used to sit on the stairs when Mel and I used to ad-lib the 2,000-Year-Old Man. He'd remember it. When he was 15, he gave us a couple jokes for it. He actually threw in the inventor of applause, where they used to do this, and then they hurt themselves, so they took their faces out.
I said, look, I got a joke, maybe you could use it or whatever. And they said, what is it? And I said, it's the derivation of applause. And they said, well, what is it? And I said, well, you know, back in those days, if somebody liked something, well, you know, if it was a great singer, or, you know, you liked what they were doing, you'd go, oh boy, is that good? Oh my God. And if you really liked it, you could kill yourself.
Folks, pull your faces out of the applause. Pull your faces out.
How did he do
What
that?
do you mean?
Could you
He
give us
went
an example?
terrific and terrific.
And he pulled his head out and he put his hands together, and then they brought it down here. They refined it. And I thought, wow, you know, I wrote a joke that Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks used.
Carl Reiner is still lending his comic skill to some of Hollywood's funniest work, recently starring in the HBO film If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast, with several of his friends who are 90 and older.
Somebody happened to notice that I wrote a thing called, when I get up in the morning, I open the obits, and if I'm not in it, I'll have breakfast. So they call, if you're not in the obits, have breakfast. Every morning before having breakfast, I pick up my newspaper, get the obituary section, and see if I'm listed. If I'm not, I'll have my breakfast. It tells you, as long as you keep doing something, you can hang around. As long as you have something to do, you'll hang around.
That's the lesson.
Yes, it is. And I use just 4 photos because they sell best.
When we arrived at Carl Reiner's home, we had a surprise for him. Earlier that morning, we spoke with Rob Reiner, who, as you'll recall, made it clear that he is his father's greatest fan. We rolled that clip from Rob's interview for his dad.
He was the greatest role model. I mean, I looked up to him. I mean, he was like a god to me. When I was like 8 years old, I told my mother that I wanted to change my name. And she went and told my father, and my father came over to me and he said, he felt bad because he thought, oh my God, this poor kid, how's he going to live up to the, being Carl Reiner's son? And it's a big, very long shadow and all that. And he said to me, he said, well, what do you want to change your name to? And I said, Carl. So, I mean, basically, I wanted to be him.
What do you think of that?
Well, what I think of it, not only did Rob Reiner surpassed anything I ever did as a director-producer.
This is the story of a father and son whose love for each other exceeds even the great talent they share.
Leave it up there.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
I'm going to read it from there. It's even better.
Not surprisingly, Carl Reiner is beginning work on his next project, transforming his 1993 novel All Kinds of Love into a screenplay for a major motion picture. You just keep going.
Well, what else can you do? If you don't keep going, you stop. And that's no fun.
Thank you, Carl and Rob Reiner, for welcoming us into your homes. We thank your staffers for pulling together decades of material to help us tell your unique story. To purchase Carl Reiner's books, please visit randomcontent.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tony Fama. The HBO documentary film, If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast, is currently streaming on HBO Go and HBO Now.
Approaching 96,